Let's be real for a second. Technically speaking, Ace Frehley wasn't the fastest guitar player in the world. He wasn't the cleanest, and half the time, on stage, he wasn't even standing up straight. But here is the sad truth that the modern shredders and the music school graduates hate to admit. None of that mattered, not even a little bit. Because Ace Frehley had something you can't teach in a classroom, and something you definitely can't buy at a guitar centre. He had the swagger that built the Kiss empire. While Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were obsessing over business models, merchandising and the bottom line, Ace was the heartbeat. He was the volatile, unpredictable rock and roll element in a corporate band. But for decades, the myth has overshadowed the man. Was he just a lucky drunk with a Les Paul? Or was he the architect who defined the swagger and created the template for American hard rock? Today, we are stripping away the makeup, the platform boots, and the pyrotechnics to expose the real mechanics behind the spaceman's sound. It's not what you think. To understand the sound, you have to understand the source. Ace wasn't a product of a conservatory or a refined music academy. He was a street kid from the Bronx. He grew up in a time and place where you had to watch your back. That grit, that danger, that feeling that everything could fall apart at any second. That is the foundational DNA of his guitar playing. When you listen to those early records, specifically the first 3 albums, you aren't hearing precision. You're hearing attitude. You're hearing survival. The notes aren't just played, they are forced out of the instrument. The narrative Gene Simmons often pushes in interviews is that Ace was lazy. But that's a misunderstanding of his process. Ace wasn't lazy. He was economical. He was instinctive. There is a massive, fundamental difference. While the rest of the band was calculating their next marketing move, Ace was plugging in and playing from the gut. He didn't worry about the theoretical names for what he was playing. He didn't know a Mixolydian mode from a hole in the ground, but he knew exactly how it was supposed to feel. He understood the emotional language of the blues, but he spoke it with a heavy New York accent. This video isn't just a guitar lesson. It's an investigation into how one man, with a very limited set of tools, created a sonic footprint that players like Mike McCready from Pearl Jam, Slash from Guns N' Roses, and the late Dimebag, Darrell worshipped. We are going to break down the specific gear modifications, the less is more philosophy, and the nervous vibrato that defined the 1970s sound. Let's start with the hardware. If you go on guitar forums today, you see people building complex digital rigs, using fractals and plugins, trying to chase this tone. But here is the irony. Ace Frehley's rig was laughably simple. It was a no-brainer, to use his own words. The core of the Spaceman sound is a Gibson Les Paul. Specifically, we are talking about the Holy Grail, the 59 burst, or those tobacco and cherry sunburst standards and customs he favoured in the mid-70s. But he didn't keep them stock. He couldn't. Here is a detail most people miss. Ace was one of the first major adopters of the Damasio Super Distortion pickup. In the early 70s, PA systems were notoriously unreliable, and amps didn't have the high gain channels or master volumes we take for granted today. He needed to drive the amp harder from the source. These ceramic pickups hit the front end of the amp like a sledgehammer. They provided that thick, creamy sustain that allowed a single note to ring out while he posed for the cameras. It wasn't just about volume, it was about pushing the signal voltage until the amp had no choice but to distort. And speaking of amps, Ace didn't mess around with gain staging in the modern sense. He used Marshall stacks, 100-watt heads. And he did the one thing that terrifies sound engineers today. He turned them all the way up. Ace is famous for saying, just plug a Les Paul into a Marshall amp and turn it up to 10. It's a no-brainer. He relied on power tube saturation. This is a crucial distinction. Modern amps often get their distortion from the preamp tubes, which can sound fizzy or compressed. Ace got his distortion from the power section working overtime. That's it. That's the secret. When you drive those old tube amps that hard, you get this natural, blooming compression. It's not a pedal, it's the sound of electricity screaming. It responds to your touch. If you hit it soft, it cleans up. If you hit it hard, it barks at you. It creates a visceral connection between the player's hands and the speaker cone that digital processors still struggle to replicate perfectly. However, there is a dirty little secret regarding the studio albums that audiophiles love to debate. While the live show was all Marshall, in the studio, Ace often blended that sound with small Fender Tweed amps, like a Fender Harvard. Why? Because a small amp pushed to its absolute breaking point sounds absolutely massive on tape. It focuses the mid-range so it cuts through the mix without muddying up the bass guitar. It sounds like a monster, even if it's only 10 inches tall. Occasionally, he'd throw in an Electro-Harmonix Big Muff for that extra layer of fuzz and infinite sustain. But he didn't rely on it for his rhythm crunch. He relied on volume. The lesson here is brutal for gearheads who love buying new toys. You can't buy Ace's tone with a processor. You have to move air. It was raw, unpolished, and intentionally dangerous. Now let's look at the technique. And we have to talk about Cold Gin. If there is one song that summarizes the Ace Frehley style, this is it. It's the anthem of the street. The theory behind it is incredibly basic. It's in 4/4 time and it uses the E minor pentatonic language. The main riff is built on power chords, E5, G5, and A5. Any beginner can play these notes after their first week of lessons, but almost no one can play them like Ace. Here is where the feel over precision argument explodes. Ace had a unique time feel that I like to call the Bronx swing. He played on the back of the beat. If you play Cold Gin perfectly on the grid, strictly in time, it sounds stiff. It sounds like a MIDI file. Ace played it like he was stumbling home but managing to stay upright. He dragged the rhythm just enough to make it heavy. It creates a tension that makes your head nod involuntarily. He utilized driving mid-tempo hard rock grooves with simple slides and bends. He wasn't trying to impress you with complexity. He was trying to punch you in the gut. The riff breathes, it has space, and notice his picking hand. He attacks the strings. He isn't gently caressing them, he is fighting them. He often used upstrokes on the offbeats to give the chords a specific snap that downstrokes just don't provide. When we look at his fills in this track, they are pure pentatonic. He lives in that box. But notice the vibrato. Ace has a very wide, almost nervous vibrato. It's distinct. It's not the wide, slow, rolling classical vibrato you hear from someone like Yngwie Malmsteen. It's a high-energy, rapid shake that makes the note sound like it's about to explode. Technically, he's using his wrist in a spasm-like motion rather than a controlled rotation. That is the signature. He took the blues influence of Clapton and Jimmy Page, stripped away the nuance, and injected it with adrenaline and anxiety. By 1976, with the Destroyer album, things changed. The band brought in producer Bob Ezrin, a man known for discipline and orchestration. The arrangements got tighter. This brings us to Detroit Rock City. This track centers on an E major hard rock framework. It's driving, it's fast, and it relies on those palm-muted chugs moving through E5, D5, A5, and G5. But the solo is a masterpiece of composition. This exposes the genius of Ace's approach. Ace didn't just noodle, he played solos that were songs within the song. You can hum every single Ace Frehley solo. Shock Me, Love Gun, Detroit Rock City. They are all hook-laden melodies. Can you say that about the shredders who came after him? Probably not. For Detroit Rock City, the solo is a composed, harmonized melody. It's rhythmic phrasing. He uses hooky motifs rather than speed. He understood that the guitar solo is the emotional peak of the song. not a math equation to be solved. Now, we have to give credit where it's due. Bob Ezrin played a massive role here, practically orchestrating the solo and writing out those vocal-like harmonies for Ace to play. But Ace had to execute it. He had to sell it. The way he attacks those bends, repeatedly hitting the same note but changing the rhythmic emphasis, creates tension. He treats the guitar like a vocalist. He takes a breath. He pauses. He lets the listener catch up before he dives back in. This is why his simple parts became the core vocabulary for hard rock. He made the guitar accessible. He made you feel like you could pick up a guitar and be a rock star, even though capturing his specific nuance is nearly impossible. So what is the legacy? Why are we still talking about a guy who hasn't been in the band for years? Because Ace Frehley is the reason an entire generation picked up the instrument. He was the bridge between the blues rock of the 60s and the heavy metal of the 80s. He took the Les Paul and Marshall combination and standardized it. But more importantly, he proved that character outweighs technique. Slash has said it. Dimebag said it constantly. They didn't want to play scales. They wanted to be cool. And nobody was cooler than Ace. The conflict within Kiss, the feud that eventually exploded and pushed Ace out, was essentially a battle between perfection and soul. Gene and Paul wanted a machine. They wanted consistency. Ace was chaos. But here is the irony that haunts the Kiss legacy. When they replaced Ace with technically superior guitarists, guys like Vinnie Vincent or Tommy Thayer, who could play circles around him, the band didn't sound better. They just sounded generic. They lost the swing. They lost the danger. You can put the makeup on another guy. You can teach him the notes of "Shock Me" note for note. But you cannot teach him how to be Ace Frehley. That loose, behind the beat, I don't care if I hit a wrong note attitude is what made the music magic. Deconstructing Ace Frehley isn't about music theory. It's about understanding that rock and roll is supposed to be flawed. It's supposed to be human. Ace's style was a reaction to his life, raw, loud, and unapologetic. He showed us that you don't need to know every scale in the book. You just need a Les Paul, a Marshall turned to 10, and the guts to stand in front of 20,000 people and play what you feel. So, here is my question for you guys. In the battle of Kiss guitarists, do you prefer the raw, sloppy soul of Ace, or do you prefer the technical perfection of the guys who replaced him? Let me know in the comments below. I read all of them. If you want more of the real history behind rock's biggest feuds, hit that subscribe button and like this video. It helps us keep the lights on. Until next time.